Turn of the Screw by Henry James has been the subject of much controversy and much study. It is difficult for a modern audience partly because of its narrative style. Obviously, the sentences are complex, they're not direct, like Hemingway would write, for example, but instead are formal speech, the governess using thoughtful verbs and complex sentences. Also, the characters have their Victorian sensibilities, and so they use a lot of ambiguous sentences. Nobody expresses themselves directly. The governess and Mrs. Gross finish each other's sentences or interrupt, and this is mainly because it was considered more mannerly not to say things openly, especially ideas about sexuality. And of course, you can't speak of the devil. This is a frame story. The frame is an English country home on Christmas Eve weekend, and it was accustomed to tell ghost stories on Christmas Eve. What effect does this have? Well, the teller, Douglas, is actually reading the story that the governess had written, and this partly reminds us that it is a story, but also Douglas's high opinion of the governess gives her a lot of credibility. One thing that people find a bit frustrating is that there's no closing frame. But you've got to ask yourself, would Douglas say any more than he did in the first place? Because he was really reticent to talk about it at all. This story becomes an important cultural artifact about Victorian attitudes, as was mentioned before, and also the importance of class or rank in this society. Quint and Jessel may have been horrid child abusers, or they may just be shocking everyone because their relationship is inappropriate because of their difference in rank. All right, there are two main interpretations of the story. One is it's a ghost story. If it's a ghost story, why? Well, we have a lot of evidence that the ghosts are real. Lots of visitations, good descriptions. The children seem to be acting strange, and Mrs. Gross believes her. So there is a possibility that we're just to accept it as a ghost story, and Henry James said something to that effect. If this is a ghost story, what does it mean? Well, if it's a ghost story, I think we have to look at it as an allegory of the struggle for evil to possess humans. So good, the governess, and evil, the ghosts, are fighting over the children who represent innocence. The other main interpretation is the psychological approach of calling it a hallucination. And there is also a lot of evidence that the ghosts are in the governess's mind. We always question the reliability of a first-person narrator, and she's telling her story. The governess calls herself easily carried away. She daydreams, wanders around, thinking about her employer, thinking about her courage, wondering if there's a secret that she has found there at Bly. Also, notice the descriptions of the ghosts. They're not necessarily as precise as we might originally think. And also, there's quite a possibility that she's heard about Quint and Miss Jessel from other people at Bly in the past. So, if we say she's hallucinating, then what does it mean? Why would she do this? Well, it's been called a crisis of responsibility, where she's very young, on her own for the first time, frightened, nervous about her new job, and she's a person who's been protected and sheltered in her father's parsonage. She would have a religious upbringing, so she would believe in the devil and ghosts and stuff. She's also read a lot of romantic fiction, and so would be thinking about the love story, and she thinks she's in love with her boss. There's an interesting way to look at the story also as that her relationship with Miles becomes rather odd, and they at some points seem almost to be flirting. Their kiss, when she says dinner, they had dinner like a married couple. So there's that you could look into as well. There's a possibility that there's all sorts of evil going on, like pedophilia and etc. But I don't think that that's necessarily true. Again, it might just be the problem of their relationship, Quint and Miss Jessel's relationship, in light of their differences in rank. There's a lot of other ways to interpret. You know, one thing, just read kind of like a detective story. Some people have suggested that Douglas is Miles grown up with the name change. Some people say Mrs. Gross is behind it all. She's in love with the employer too. There's just a lot of possibilities. There's also another cultural way to interpret it, and that is as an indictment of boarding schools. People were becoming concerned about boarding schools, and it was an age of sudden reform. So another issue. Of course, bringing up the idea of Victorian hypocrisy, which we rather mentioned, and there are literary interpretations too that look at the importance of storytelling, would analyze the title as important. Also, this was published originally in, I believe, 12 different installments, and does that affect our interpretation at all? There have been a lot of film versions of this, and we have at least one on this website. That one is a very faithful adaptation, but there are many more that you could take a look at if you'd like.